Humans turned warfare into an art form. You want to know why we lost? I mean really lost. Not just tactically, not just strategically, but completely, utterly, soul-crushingly lost. It's because we didn't understand them. Not really. We saw a species that hadn't yet mastered energy shielding, whose ships looked like scrap piles bolted to engines, and whose soldiers still carried weapons that used burning chemicals to launch chunks of metal. We saw all that and thought, primitive. But we were wrong. Because while we were busy perfecting plasma weapons, while we were building elegant ships with balanced energy flows and quantum targeting systems, humans were doing something else. Something no one else in the galaxy had even thought to do. They were turning war into art. And not just in the poetic sense. I mean real, deliberate craftsmanship. They studied it, dissected it, lived it, and refined it like it was a cultural legacy. While we were theorizing ideal battlefield geometry, humans were writing books, creating simulations, inventing games, all about war. And not just from the general's view either. They obsessed over every level, from guerrilla ambushes in the jungle to high-orbit siege warfare. They made it entertainment. They made it history. They made it themselves. Their earliest conflicts, long before they left their homeworld, were brutal. Millions died over tribal disputes, borders, and resources. But they didn't just forget those battles. They remembered. They studied them. They created entire institutions to analyze them. They wrote manuals, filmed documentaries, reenacted them for teaching, and turned those lessons into doctrine. You know what we were doing back then? Running simulations, cold, lifeless projections about optimal firepower to defense ratios. Efficient, logical, and completely unprepared for the human approach. Because for humans, war wasn't just math, it was narrative, strategy, psychology, philosophy. They fought not just with weapons, but with ideas. And the terrifying part? They got good at it. During our first major engagement, we deployed a fleet with state-of-the-art targeting systems, AI battle coordination, and mathematically perfect formation symmetry. On paper, we were unbeatable. We'd spent decades refining those methods. You know what the humans did. They laughed. Then they started improvising, using outdated railguns to punch holes in our sensor arrays, launching decoy ships made from scrap hulls and old satellite drives. They flew in irregular formations, bounced signals between ships, and turned their chaos into advantage. We were caught off guard not because they had superior firepower, but because they didn't follow the rules. They didn't have rules. They had instincts, creativity, and somehow coordination in that chaos. They didn't just adapt to changing battlefield conditions, they thrived in them. While our ships hesitated for permission from AI overseers, their captains were already moving, reacting, acting. They fought like it was personal, like they were dancing through combat, not marching. That's when I started to understand. Humans didn't view war as a last resort or a necessary evil. They saw it as a test, a challenge of mind, body, and will. And they liked it. Not the killing, not the dying, although, let's be honest, a few of them probably do. But the problem, war, to them, was a puzzle to be solved, and they were damn good at solving it. You ever see a human child play capture the flag? They treat it like real battle, stealth, deception, communication, timing. And when they grow up, they don't stop. They move on to video games that simulate complex combat situations. They build entire online communities around strategies, tactics, role-playing military command structures. By the time they reach adulthood, your average human civilian has probably thought more about small unit tactics than most of our military leadership. And that's just the civilians. Their military? That's another level entirely. Human special forces operate with a kind of surgical precision that seems impossible until you realize they train for it constantly. Not just physically, but mentally. They run war games in their sleep. They read about historical battles and debate what went right or wrong. They improvise, they think, they create. And when they step onto a battlefield, it's not just muscle memory, it's artistic expression. They don't just follow orders, they interpret them, like a jazz musician riffing off a central theme. They read the flow of battle like a story, a dynamic, shifting, living thing. And they respond with the creativity of a sculptor molding clay in real time, except the clay is the battlefield, and the tools are bullets, blades, drones, and orbital strikes. That's what we never saw coming. We were fighting with doctrine. They were fighting with vision. We brought science. They brought art. And art, real, passionate, inspired art, changes the game. So yeah, we lost. Badly. Not because we were weak, or outgunned, or outnumbered. We lost because we were predictable. We brought logic to a knife fight with jazz musicians, and they danced circles around us. Technology is just a tool to them. When we first faced humans on the battlefield, we laughed. Honestly, we did. We looked at their gear, their crude ballistic weapons, their noisy chemical rockets, their clunky armor, and thought, that's it. That's what we're up against. Our fleets ran on quantum navigation. Our weapons were guided by neural-linked AI. Our infantry wore adaptive armor that could phase shift under incoming fire. Compared to us, humans looked like they were fighting with sticks and duct tape. And yet, we lost. Not just once, not just by accident. Again and again, we lost. It took me years to understand why. It wasn't that our technology was worse, it wasn't. We had the better tech, on paper at least. Our gear was more advanced, more refined, more elegant. That was the problem. We saw technology as the solution, the centerpiece, the be-all and end-all of war. Humans didn't. To humans, technology is just a tool. It's not the point. It's not the focus. It's just something to be used or ignored, depending on the situation. If plasma rifles worked, they'd use them. If a shovel worked better, they'd use that instead. They don't care about what's advanced. They care about what's effective. I once saw a human soldier toss aside his state-of-the-art pulse weapon mid-battle because it jammed. Instead of fixing it or switching to another fancy piece of gear, he picked up a piece of broken rebar from the ground, a jagged chunk of rusted metal, and charged straight into the enemy line. It wasn't graceful, it wasn't efficient, but it worked. That's how humans think. They don't worship their technology. They don't overcomplicate it. They mix the old with the new, like it's nothing. Plasma rifles side by side with sniper rifles that still use gunpowder. Mechanical sights mounted next to AI-assisted targeting. Analog dials next to holographic overlays. They'll use whatever gets the job done, and they don't apologize for it. We never got that. Our doctrine told us that anything outdated was to be discarded. That weapons had to be perfectly integrated. That every ship, every suit, every drone had to match. Symmetry, compatibility, optimization, that was how we fought. Humans? They improvise. I've seen human starships that look like scrapyards held together by prayers and duct tape outmaneuver our sleekest cruisers. They don't build for elegance. They build for survival. Their ships are ugly. Yes, brutalist. Armored slabs with engines strapped to the back. But those ships take a beating. You can punch through our shielding with precision fire. But human ships, you can pound on them for hours, and they just keep moving. And when something breaks, they don't shut down, they fix it. In the middle of battle, with tools, with spare parts, with creativity. A human engineer is half mechanic, half magician. We used to joke that human designs looked like they came from a different era, that their ships were flying museums. What we didn't realize was that humans keep old tech around on purpose. Not for nostalgia, for options. See? Their way of war isn't about having the best gear. It's about having choices, multiple layers of capability. If the energy weapon fails, they've got bullets. If the computers crash, they switch to manual. If the AI goes rogue, they unplug it and go analog. Redundancy isn't just a design principle, it's their philosophy, and it goes deeper than that. Humans don't just rely on equipment. They train for it to fail. Every soldier is taught to keep fighting if the comms go dark, if the map is gone, if the leader dies. We rely on systems. Humans rely on themselves. And then there's their psychological approach. We thought their tech limitations would be a morale issue, that using outdated equipment would make them feel weak. But humans are proud of their resilience. They take pride in making do with less, in winning with what should have been a disadvantage. Field expedient is a phrase they love. It means we made it work with what we had. That's terrifying. Because you can take away a human's weapon, their ship, their armor, hell, even their oxygen, and they'll still find a way to hurt you. With their fists, with debris, with a sharpened piece of scrap. And if they've got nothing at all, they'll use their words. Humans can weaponize fear, propaganda, confusion. They'll make you doubt your orders, make you question your own people. They'll fight you mentally, even if they can't reach you physically. And they'll do it with a grin. That's why we lost. We thought war was about having the best stuff, the flashiest ships, the most advanced weapons. For humans, that's secondary, because they don't rely on tools. They use them, and when those tools break, they don't stop. They adapt. Humans actually enjoy war, but not the way you think. I'll be the first to admit, when we first encountered humans in combat, I didn't understand them. In fact, for a long time, none of us did. We saw them as a species that was still in the process of catching up. They had no advanced weapons to speak of. Their ships were clunky, their technology primitive by our standards. And yet, time and time again, they managed to find a way to win, and not just win, but enjoy it. At first, we thought it was just a fluke. We outnumbered them, outgunned them, outclassed them in every metric that mattered. They should have folded under the weight of our superior forces, but they didn't. Instead, they laughed. They laughed in the face of overwhelming odds. They looked at our battle formations, our state-of-the-art strategies, and they laughed. And then they started throwing rocks. Not literal rocks, mind you, but rods, tungsten rods, dropped from orbit. In an instant, they turned a simple chunk of metal into a devastating weapon of mass destruction. Pure kinetic energy. No signatures, no radiation, just a hunk of metal falling from space, creating a shockwave that obliterated anything in its path. No energy signature, no warning, just death. It was so simple, so utterly primitive, that we didn't even know how to react. We thought we had perfected the art of war, and then humans, with their ragtag, unsophisticated weaponry, proved us wrong. They weren't bound by the same rules we were. They didn't need the most advanced tech. They didn't need precision-guided lasers or plasma cannons. They needed creativity. It wasn't just the rocks either. Oh no. They made a game out of war. They treated it like a sport, a challenge to overcome. And this is the part that took me the longest to comprehend. They didn't fight for the same reasons we did. For us, war was a grim necessity, a matter of survival, a means to an end, but for humans, they treated it like an opportunity, a test, a game. I'll never forget the first time I saw it firsthand. We had them cornered. Our ships had them trapped. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and their systems were barely functioning. Every tactical calculation on our side said they were finished. But humans, they weren't finished. They were having fun. They weren't panicking. They weren't scrambling. Instead, they were laughing. They were singing, actually. I thought I was hearing things at first. It was a strange, haunting song. Something about parachutes failing or something like that. It was an old war song, an anthem of their soldiers who had fought and died long before we ever met them. And as they sang, they launched a counterattack. Not with fancy energy weapons or sleek spacecraft, but with boarding parties. They used chemical rockets to launch their soldiers into the heart of our ships. They breached our hulls with nothing more than basic thermal lances, essentially just superheated metal rods. They weren't using high-tech plasma cutters or advanced lasers. They were using basic tools to cut through some of the most advanced ships in the galaxy. They weren't trying to win. They were enjoying themselves. That was the moment it clicked for me. Humans don't fight the way we do. They don't just fight to survive. They fight because they love the challenge, the puzzle, The game. It wasn't just military conflict either. Their entire culture is built around this idea. They grow up playing war games. Games like paintball, laser tag, capture the flag. As children, they practice strategies, tactics, and teamwork. They treat combat as a game of strategy and skill, not something to be feared or avoided. In fact, many humans spend more time playing war games and video games simulating combat than we spend training our own soldiers. And that's the difference. We were trained to fight with precision. We studied doctrine, strategies, and optimal solutions. We approached battle like it was a science, but humans, they approached it like it was an art form. They didn't just fight to defeat their enemies. They fought to create something. They wanted to see the puzzle pieces come together, to outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast their opponents. And the worst part, they actually enjoyed it. It's not that they wanted to see destruction. It wasn't about violence for the sake of violence. It was about the challenge of it. They weren't playing to win. They were playing to test themselves, to see what they were capable of, to see how far they could push the boundaries of what was possible. I've seen humans in the heat of battle when everything is falling apart, and yet they're calm. They're smiling. They're enjoying the moment, while we're focused on the statistics, the casualties, the losses, the odds. They're thinking about the next move. What's the next challenge? How do we turn this disaster into an opportunity? And that's what makes them so dangerous. When they fight, they don't just do it out of necessity. They do it because they can't help it. It's in their DNA. They've been preparing for this their entire lives, from childhood games to adulthood. They don't fight because they're angry. They fight because they enjoy the strategy, the unpredictability, the creativity of war. They fight because they want to. We thought we could outfight them. We thought our advanced technology, our superior numbers, our calculated strategies would be enough. But it wasn't. We didn't understand that humans didn't view war as something to be avoided or feared. They viewed it as something to be mastered, something to enjoy. And that's what made them so terrifying. Because when you fight someone who enjoys the challenge, someone who looks at a battlefield and sees possibilities rather than threats, you're already at a disadvantage. They're not just trying to defeat you. They're trying to outthink you, outplay you, and outlast you. And let me tell you, we were never ready for that. The deadliest weapon, human creativity. If you ask me what the most dangerous thing about humans is, and I mean really ask me, after everything I've seen, it's not their weapons. It's not their numbers. It's not even their willingness to fight. No, the deadliest thing they bring to the battlefield is something far more unpredictable. It's their creativity. Let me explain something. Most species, when they go to war, treat it like math. You plan, you calculate, you execute. You follow the doctrine. Stick to the playbook. You trust the numbers. That's what we did. Every battle plan was designed by our most brilliant strategic minds. Every move was simulated thousands of times by military A's. We had the perfect answer for every situation, on paper. But when we fought humans, the paper caught fire. You want to know what they did during the Battle of Ima Centauri? We had them dead to rights. Superior positioning, superior firepower, overwhelming numbers. We even controlled the terrain, or at least we thought we did. It was a perfect setup. No way out. So what did the humans do? They detonated their own reactors. I'm not joking. They intentionally disabled their ships by overloading their antimatter containment fields. The resulting MP blast didn't just disable their systems, it fried ours too. The entire region went dark. No guidance, no targeting, no comms. Chaos. We were stunned. That move made no sense. Why would any species cripple their own fleet? But then, in the silence, in the dark, they came. Human boarding parties, launched from disabled ships using ancient chemical thrusters. No guidance systems, no energy trails. Just dumb rockets and people in pressure suits, cutting through our hulls with what looked like metal rods heated until they glowed. Thermal lenses, primitive, inelegant, devastating. And while they did it, They were singing. I still remember the sound. Some old grim melody, not a victory song. A song about failure, about death, about parachutes that don't open. Blood on the risers. I think it was called. They sang it as they breached our ship. It chilled me more than the breach alarms. That's human creativity in action. See, we had battle doctrines optimized for efficiency, for control. They had improvisation. While we were following predetermined orders, their officers were rewriting the playbook mid-battle. Their soldiers weren't just executing tactics. They were inventing new ones on the spot. Adapting, evolving, seeing not just the rules, but how to bend them, or break them entirely. And it wasn't just desperation. It wasn't chaos. It was intention. To us, the battlefield was a puzzle with one solution, the optimal one. To humans, it was a blank canvas, a space to experiment. Every variable was a brushstroke. Every setback, a chance to paint something new. Their commanders didn't just issue orders. They told stories, building a narrative as they went. And their people followed, not out of blind obedience, but because they understood the vision. Do you know how dangerous that is? How unpredictable? They didn't just use weapons. They weaponized everything: terrain, timing, psychology, rumors. They'd spread misinformation so effectively that some of our soldiers surrendered without a shot fired, convinced that humans could smell fear or grant mercy only to the unresisting. Lies. Urban legends. But effective. That's what matters to them. Not truth, not beauty, effectiveness. We once captured a human commander after a brutal campaign. We asked him why he used such erratic strategies, why he risked everything on seemingly insane maneuvers. You know what he said. Because the enemy never expects crazy. That was it. That was the answer, and it worked. Over and over. Humans don't fear unconventional thinking. They embrace it. In fact, they train for it. Their academies don't just teach tactics, they teach how to think differently. They study not only military history, but literature, philosophy, psychology. They learn how to understand their opponents, not just their formations, but their minds. We underestimated how far they were willing to go. One time, they turned an asteroid belt into a minefield, not by deploying mines, but by manually pushing unstable ore clusters into orbits that would intersect our path. The resulting chain reaction destroyed half our fleet. No tech, just orbital physics and raw human stubbornness. You see, humans don't care if a tactic is old or new, elegant or crude. If it works, it's valid. They'll use a centuries-old tank shell next to a cutting-edge drone. They'll patch a failing engine with chewing gum and duct tape. And while you're laughing, they're already 2 steps ahead, improvising their way into victory. That's the scariest part of all. Because you can't predict creativity. You can't simulate it. You can't preempt it. And you definitely can't control it. And humans, they breathe it. It's in their culture, their stories, their music, their games. Especially their games. They build entire simulations, video games, they call them, just to explore every possible combat scenario. They play these for fun, millions of them, planning raids, practicing tactics, testing limits. It's entertainment, yes, but it's also training. Unintentional, maybe, but incredibly effective. By the time they reach adulthood, many humans have internalized more about war strategy than our veteran commanders. That's why our projections kept failing. Our systems couldn't model what they would do, because they didn't know what they would do until they did it. They responded instinctively, creatively, with the accumulated experience of not just their military, but their entire species. They don't follow orders. They write their own. And in the end, that's why we lost. Not because they had more guns, not because they were faster or stronger, but because we brought rules to a fight, and they brought ideas. Humans fight for fun, but they have rules. One of the most unsettling things I ever learned about humans is that, in a strange way, they enjoy fighting. That's not to say they enjoy killing. No, that's not it. In fact, most of them seem genuinely disturbed by unnecessary death. but fighting itself, the act of combat. The test of skill, the clash of wills, the thrill of trying to outthink and outmaneuver another person. That part, the love. And that's not speculation. I saw it firsthand. You'll find it in how they train, how they speak, how they play. Because to humans, combat isn't always life or death. Sometimes it's a game, a sport, a performance. From childhood, they're raised to compete, physically, mentally, emotionally. They have games that simulate war on every scale, from kids running around playing capture the flag to elaborate multiplayer virtual simulations where hundreds of players coordinate tactics, logistics, and strategy over weeks. And it's not just the simulations. They spar constantly. Martial arts are widespread among their civilians. Combat sports are televised and idolized. They fight with foam swords, paintball guns, VR headsets. They build entire fields just for mock battles, with rules, teams, objectives. They track wins and losses. They celebrate them. They cheer, laugh, trash talk. They've made war into play, and it's not mindless violence either. There's a code to it. Every one of those games has rules. Honor systems, guidelines, sportsmanship. You don't hit someone who's down. You don't attack from behind unless the rules allow it. You don't cheat. And if you do break the rules, even in play, they'll call you out, ostracize you, shame you. Because even when humans play at war, they play by a code. And it doesn't stop in childhood. I remember a post-war event, a peace summit, they called it. There were diplomats, military leaders, scholars, all seated around polished tables under banners of unity. But you know what else they arranged? A paintball tournament. I kid you not. Humans and a handful of curious alien officers divided into teams, donned tactical gear, and spent an entire day simulating urban warfare in a mock city. There was laughter, shouting, even bets being placed. Some got really into it. One human commander painted his face and quoted an old Earth movie the entire match. They weren't just having fun. They were bonding, building trust, testing one another in the only way they truly know how, through competition. That's when it hit me. For humans, fighting is a form of communication, a language, a way of expressing identity, strength, wit. They don't always fight because they're angry. Sometimes they fight to connect. But here's the thing, and this is what separates them from the monsters of the galaxy. They have limits. We assumed a species that fought so freely would lack restraint, that they'd be chaotic, dangerous, uncontrolled. But it's the opposite. The more you watch humans, the more you realize they don't just fight hard. They fight fair when given the chance. They have codes of conduct, international agreements, philosophical debates about the ethics of warfare. They argue about when violence is justified, what targets are acceptable, how to protect the innocent. They write laws about it, enforce them. They call it the laws of war. Even in the heat of battle, human soldiers are taught rules, not just how to win, but how to win the right way. No targeting civilians, no torturing prisoners, no unnecessary destruction. Not because someone forced them to, but because they believe in it. It's part of their identity, the idea that war should have limits. That even at their worst, they should still hold onto something human. But break those rules, cross those lines, then everything changes. I've seen what happens when someone violates their code, when someone targets what humans consider sacred, children, refugees, hospitals. The shift is instant and terrifying. The same humans who laughed and joked and quoted movies will go cold. Their eyes change, their posture tightens, and they no longer fight for fun. They fight with purpose, with rage, with focus so absolute. It's like watching a star collapse into itself. But even then, they don't lose control. They don't start slaughtering indiscriminately. They stay precise, measured, disciplined. That's what's so terrifying. The fury isn't wild. It's focused. And once their moral engine engages, there's no stopping it. I asked a human officer once why they care so much about rules. Why, in a universe where so many species treat war as a tool, they insist on fighting ethically. He thought about it, then told me this. Because if we don't hold ourselves to something better, then what's the point? We already know how good we are at destroying things. The real test is whether we can choose not to. That stayed with me, because that's the difference. Humans don't follow rules because they're weak. They follow rules because they can. Because despite all their power, all their ability to wage war better than anyone else, they still remember what it's like to be vulnerable. And they don't want to become the thing they fight against. So yes, humans fight for fun. But it's not the violence they enjoy. It's the game, the puzzle, the expression, the connection. And they play by rules that most of us forgot long ago. Break those rules. Then you'll see the other side of them. And trust me, you don't want to see that side. What happens when humans get angry? We all knew humans could fight. That much was obvious from the beginning. They were unpredictable, adaptive, relentless, all the things that make an opponent difficult to pin down. But even then, we told ourselves we could handle them. That with enough numbers, enough pressure, enough firepower, we could break them. And for a while, we believed it. Until someone made the mistake of making them angry. I don't mean battlefield frustration. That happens to every species. I'm talking about something much deeper, something primal. The kind of anger that doesn't explode in chaos, but collapses inward, hardening into something cold and focused. The kind of anger that stops being emotional and becomes calculated, efficient, lethal. You see, humans are terrifying when they're calm, but when they're furious, they're unstoppable. I saw it happen. I saw the moment it all shifted. There was a refugee ship, non-combatants, children. It wasn't even entirely human, a mix of species fleeing a conflict zone. The vessel was slow, underarmed, barely shielded, and it got hit. Pirates, not aligned with any major power, boarded, stole supplies, and vented part of the habitat ring into space. Over 70 lives lost, 40 of them children. We didn't expect much fallout. Tragic, yes, but war always leaves scars, right? That's what we told ourselves. Until we saw the silence. The humans didn't scream. They didn't issue threats. No grand declarations of vengeance. Just quiet, chilling, heavy, suffocating quiet. And then they moved. Fleet mobilization orders went out within hours. Ships rerouted from multiple sectors. Intelligence networks lit up like solar flares. There was no bluster, no drama, just action. Precise, coordinated, methodical. They weren't looking to punish. They were looking to end it. It turned out the pirates weren't unknown. The humans had been tracking them for years, gathering data, mapping their networks, building dossiers. They knew where they operated, where they refueled, where they hid, and they had been waiting, watching, holding back, because they hadn't yet had the moral justification to strike. Now they did. And that's the moment I realized how terrifying humans can be. Not when they're attacked, but when they're justified, when the moral compass that guides them swings to righteous fury. What followed wasn't a battle. It was a dismantling, a dissection. Within days, the pirates' outposts fell one by one. Not bombarded, captured, every asset seized, every ship impounded, crews taken alive, interrogated, prosecuted. They didn't want revenge. They wanted accountability. And yet, even then, they still offered surrender, still followed the rules, gave choices, gave mercy, not because they were weak, because they were strong enough not to let anger dictate cruelty. But that didn't mean the fury wasn't there. I saw it in their eyes. The officers, the soldiers, even the engineers. This wasn't just a mission. It was personal, controlled, yes, disciplined, absolutely, but every step carried a weight, a purpose. You don't want to fight humans when they're calm. But you never ever want to fight them when they believe they're on the side of justice, because that's when they move as one. No dissent. Dissent. No hesitation, no fear, just unity. I watched entire fleets, human and allied, move like a single organism. Dozens of species following a rhythm set not by a song or speech, but by human resolve. That's what their rage does. It doesn't just fuel them. It ignites others. And when the operation was over, when the last pirate base had fallen, what did they do? They didn't gloat. They didn't celebrate. They mourned. They gathered the names of the victims, built a memorial on the nearest station, invited survivors, diplomats, even former enemies to attend. And they stood there, heads bowed, while a human child read the names of every lost soul. Then they sang, not a war song, not a chant of victory, a lullaby. I will never forget the sound. That's what makes them terrifying. Not just the ability to destroy, but the depth of what drives them. When humans get angry, truly angry, they don't lash out wildly. They channel it, shape it, turn it into something deliberate and devastating. And it's not about domination. It's about protection. That's what most species don't understand. When humans fight, it's not always because they hate what's in front of them. It's because they love what's behind them. The people, the values, the future they're trying to shield. And when that's threatened, you're not facing soldiers anymore. You're facing guardians, and they will not stop. I once asked a human admiral, after the operation, why they hadn't unleashed their full military might from the beginning. Why wait? Why let the pirates operate for so long? He looked at me, tired but steady, and said, because we don't fight just because. We fight when we must, when the line's been crossed, when there's no other option. And when that happens, we don't hold back. But until then, we prepare, we wait, we watch. He paused. And we remember. Those words stayed with me. Because that's the true danger of human anger. It's not loud, it's not chaotic, it's patient. It waits, it builds, and when it's finally unleashed, it doesn't burn out. It endures, like a storm that never stops until the sky is clear again. So if you ever find yourself on the wrong side of humanity, not just in battle, but in principle, take my advice. Don't provoke them. Because when humans get angry, they don't just come for your weapons. They come for your justification. And when they strip that away, when you have nothing left to stand on, you'll realize the truth. Their fury isn't fire, it's judgment. Humans never fight alone. The power of alliances. If you think the most dangerous thing about humans is their strength, you haven't been paying attention. It's not their weapons, although they're terrifying. It's not their tactics, though those are unpredictable, creative, and brutal when necessary. No, the real reason you should never pick a fight with humanity? It's because they never fight alone. When we went to war, we thought we were facing one species, one planet, one civilization. That's how war has always been for us. You fight your enemy and your enemy alone. Maybe they have colonies or client states, sure, but true allies, coordinated, dedicated partners, rare, fragile. But humans? They build alliances the way other species breathe. It starts small, a trade agreement, a mutual defense pact, an exchange program. Nothing that looks threatening at first. But give it time, and suddenly you realize you're not facing humans, plural. You're facing humanity, multiplied, amplified, extended through every species they've ever shaken hands with. It's not just politics. It's not just military cooperation. It's trust. That's what sets humans apart. They don't just coordinate, they connect. They don't just align objectives, they build relationships, friendships, brotherhood. They share stories, values, victories, and more importantly, losses. I saw it during the Second Arcturus campaign. The humans were stretched thin, low on ships, their supply lines a mess. We thought it was the perfect time to strike. Isolate their fleet, break their command structure, hit them hard where they couldn't recover. But we didn't just face humans. We faced a fleet made up of 5 different species. Ships of different shapes, speeds, weapons, crews with entirely incompatible operating languages and traditions. And yet, they moved like a single organism. They rotated positions mid-engagement, covered each other's weaknesses, acted without hesitation. It should have been chaos. It was unity. How? Because humans trained them. Not just in war games or manuals, but with them. They ran joint simulations, hosted cultural exchanges, built camaraderie between species who'd never even spoken to each other before humanity arrived. Humans didn't impose doctrine, they shared it, adapted it, learned from others while offering their own. They didn't just teach their allies how to fight. They made them want to fight alongside them. That's what's terrifying. Not the coordination, not the logistics, the loyalty. Because when humans go to war, they don't just call in backup. They call in friends, allies who trust them, who believe in them, who have seen humanity bleed and stand back up time and time again. And those allies don't follow orders out of obligation. They follow them out of respect. Do you know what that means on a battlefield? It means humans can move entire coalitions with a whisper. I once spoke with a captain from the Ventari species, usually neutral, fiercely independent. I asked him why he risked his ship and crew to defend a human convoy during the war. He looked at me and said simply, because they would have done the same for us. That's all. No treaty, no strategic gain, just trust. You can't manufacture that. You can't fake it. You earn it. And humans? They earn it the hard way, by showing up, standing beside you, and never backing down. And when they get angry, like they did after the Carina Nebula incident, they don't just rally their own fleets. They inspire others. Within hours, task forces across multiple sectors mobilized. Not because they were ordered to, because they wanted to. Because every captain, every admiral, every civilian watching that news feed felt it. That this wasn't just a human problem. It was a threat to all of us. That's the power humanity brings to war. Not just guns and grit, but alignment, purpose, the ability to make others care. To unify species who would never otherwise stand side by side and turn them into something greater than the sum of their parts. You can't plan against that. You can't outgun it. Because how do you stop an army of species who fight like they belong to one? And humanity remembers too. They don't forget who stood with them. I've seen human memorials that include the names of alien soldiers. I've seen children on Earth taught to honor the bravery of their alien allies. I've seen medals handed to commanders from other species at human victory parades, not as symbols of conquest, but as marks of family. That's what fighting beside humans means. You don't just share the war. You share the story. And once you've done that, once you've fought beside a human, cried beside one, bled beside one, you're not foreign anymore. You're theirs, and they are yours. And if anyone threatens you after that, they'll have to go through all of them. That's why we lost. Not because we were outnumbered by one species, but because we were outnumbered by hope, trust, unity, and nothing in the galaxy, no weapon, no strategy, no force, can break that kind of bond. Humans remember every battle. If you really want to understand what sets humans apart, what makes them truly different, you have to look beyond the battlefield. Beyond the tactics, beyond the tech, the allies, the firepower. You have to look at how they remember. Because humans don't forget, not their victories, not their losses, not their mistakes, especially not their dead. That, more than anything, is what gives them power. Not just the ability to fight, but the why behind it. And that why is written in blood, carved into stone, and carried like a weight in every soldier's heart. See, for most species, war is transactional. You go to war, you fight, you move on, You record it in your history files. Maybe there's a memorial or two, a day of recognition, and then it fades. But for humans, war lingers. For lore lingers. It lives. On Earth, there's a wall, simple, black, polished like a mirror. No statues, no symbols of victory, just names, row after row, tens of thousands of them, each one a person, each one a life cut short. Soldiers mostly, but also medics, engineers, pilots, communications officers, people who stood in harm's way and didn't come back. They come to that wall. Families, friends, sometimes even strangers. They touch the names, leave flowers, medals, notes, drawings from children, and they remember not just the war, not just the cause, but the people, the ones who didn't get to grow old, the ones who paid for the peace the others now enjoy. And that kind of remembering, it changes you. It makes humans cautious, thoughtful, aware of the cost, but it also makes them resolute. Because they carry those memories forward, not to wallow, but to honor, to learn. Every battle they fight isn't just another page in history. It's a continuation of a story that began long before the stars. A story written in sacrifice. I once spoke with a human veteran after a joint ceremony between our species. I asked him why humans place so much focus on the past. Why not just look forward? Why not let go? He handed me a small metal tag on a chain, worn, dented, almost ancient by our standards. His grandfather's, he said, from a war centuries ago. He carried this into hell, the veteran told me, voice steady. And every generation since has carried it forward, not to glorify what happened, but to remember what it cost. That stuck with me. Because when humans fight, they don't just bring weapons. They bring memories. They remember every time they weren't ready. Every time they failed to protect the innocent. Every time they underestimated an enemy. Every time they let fear or pride lead them down the wrong path. And they let that pain shape them, not into something bitter, but into something better. That's why their soldiers train so hard. Why they prepare so thoroughly. Why they build alliances and share tactics and think 10 moves ahead. It's not just strategy. It's penance. It's respect. It's an oath not to repeat the same mistakes. And that memory? It doesn't just live in the military. It's cultural, generational. Their children are taught about past wars, the good, the bad, and the horrific. They learn about genocide, about civilian casualties, about unjust invasions. They don't hide their failures, they teach them. And they do it not to shame themselves, but to remind the next generation what happens when good people do nothing, or when power is used without wisdom. Even their stories reflect this. Their books, their films, their songs. I once watched a human movie about a war that happened centuries ago. It didn't celebrate the battle. It mourned it, and yet the message wasn't despair. It was resolve, a promise that they would remember, that they would do better. Most species forget their failures. Humans build monuments to them, because they know something we often overlook. Forgetting is the first step toward repeating. And that's why, when tragedy strikes, like the Carina Nebula incident, their response isn't just about justice. It's about memory. It's about all the other times it happened, all the lives that were lost before, and the unspoken vow, not again. That vow echoes through their ranks, in how they move, how they speak, how they fight. Every commander carries the ghosts of those who came before. Every decision is made with their weight on the shoulders. It's not superstition. It's responsibility. That's what makes them dangerous. Because you're not fighting one army. You're fighting the sum total of every war they've ever fought, every lesson they've ever learned, every mistake they swore they'd never repeat. And when they do make a mistake, when they fail, when they lose someone, they don't forget it. They burn it into their bones and carry it forward. I saw it during the battle to reclaim the refugee ship. When the last pirate vessel was captured, there was no celebration, no cheers, just quiet. And then, a ceremony. Not for the victory, for the lost. Names were read, images displayed, officers saluted, even the Allied captains bowed their heads, and then a human commander stood up and said simply, "We remember," because they deserve to be remembered, because their stories didn't end in silence, and because their memory will guide our next steps, every one of them. That's what it means to fight with humans. It means you don't just join a cause, you join a legacy. And that legacy isn't one of conquest or domination. It's one of memory, of never forgetting why the fight began, what it cost, and who it was for. So the next time you think about challenging humanity, remember this. They'll remember you too, forever. The true reason humans are the gods of war. So after everything, after the battles, the treaties, the scars left behind on worlds and minds, people still ask me, why are humans called the gods of war? Is it their technology? No. Their strength. Not exactly. Their alliances, their adaptability, their fierce loyalty, those are part of it. But the true reason, it's because they understand war better than anyone, and they choose not to use it until there's no other way. That's the paradox that makes them so dangerous, so unique, so revered and feared. They have mastered violence in all its forms. They could be conquerors, tyrants, galactic overlords if they wanted to be. But they're not. They hold themselves back, again and again, until you give them a reason not to. And when that reason comes, you see what it means for a species to fight not out of rage or greed, but out of purpose. That's what makes them gods. Because they do not fight lightly. They do not strike first. But when the line is crossed, when children are harmed, when the innocent are slaughtered, when their allies are betrayed, when peace is broken, they rise. And they don't stop. They become something else. Not just soldiers, not just tacticians or warriors or diplomats with weapons. They become force, force with direction, force with memory, force with unity, not chaos, not hatred. Just the full weight of everything they are, brought down like a hammer of moral clarity. I've seen it. I've seen humans rally fleets, not out of obligation, but out of conviction. I've seen them offer surrender to enemies who tried to wipe them out, and mean it. I've seen them weep over the lives of those they were forced to kill. And I've seen them walk away from fights they knew they could win because it wasn't the right fight. What kind of species does that? A dangerous one. A wise one. The wise one. A species that doesn't just know how to fight, but when not to. That's what separates them from everyone else. Most species view war as a necessity. Some as an opportunity. A few as a game. But humans? They see it as a responsibility. They don't romanticize it, though they do write songs and poems and movies about it. They don't worship it, though they honor their dead like saints, and they don't run from it either. When it comes, they meet it head on. But always, always with one question in their hearts. Is this worth it? And when the answer is yes, stars help you. Because then they fight with everything. Their strength, their creativity, their allies, their pain, their history, their future. It all gets channeled into the fight. Not to dominate, but to end it. To finish what someone else was foolish enough to start. That's the difference. Others fight to win. Humans fight to end. And when it's over, when the dust settles and the bodies are buried and the battlefield is quiet again, they don't dance, they don't boast. They rebuild, they reflect, they hold ceremonies. They honor not just their fallen, but sometimes even their enemies, because they know that war is ugly no matter who wins. And that's when you realize the most powerful thing about humans isn't their guns or their grit. It's their restraint. Their ability to hold all that potential, all that capability, all that fury, and wait. Wait for the right moment. Wait for justification. Wait for the time when their action will mean something more than just destruction. That is divine. Because anyone can destroy. But only those with true strength can choose not to. So yes, humans are the gods of war, not because they fight better than anyone, but because they understand war better than anyone. They understand its cost, its weight, its echoes. They know what happens when you fight without purpose. They've lived through their own mistakes, and they remember. Oh stars, do they remember? They carry it in their bones, their art, their silence. And when they finally move, when they finally say, "This is the line," and you have crossed it, you feel the weight of their decision like gravity, heavy, final, justified. You can fight them, yes, but you cannot shake them, because they don't fight alone. They fight with generations behind them, and generations ahead of them. They fight with the names etched in stone and the stories whispered at bedtime. They fight with every lesson, every loss, every last goodbye. And when they stop, they teach. They reach out to former enemies. They forgive. Because they know that the true power isn't in victory. It's in what you do after. That's why they are feared. That's why they are respected. That's why they are called gods. Because in a galaxy full of weapons and warriors, of conquerors and killers, they are the only ones who mastered war and chose to make it their last resort.